Okay, so we are looking at the Unit 7 review sheet here. We're going to skip the first question, the timeline one, and go right to number 2. So President Eisenhower continued President Truman's basic policy of containing communism, but there were two new ideas added under Eisenhower's term. So one of them was massive retaliation. The idea here is that the U.S. would threaten to respond to any Soviet aggression with a massive nuclear attack. The United States built up a huge arsenal of nuclear missiles on ships, ground-based missiles, missiles on planes, as basically a deterrent or a way to convince the Soviets not to attack the United States or any of our allies, because if they did, the retaliation would be so massive. The idea of brinksmanship is similar. Under brinksmanship, the U.S. would kind of reduce the size of our conventional forces, but really build up our supply of nuclear weapons. And when tensions were high with the Soviets, sometimes the U.S. would go right to the brink of war or right to the very edge of declaring war, but then back down. And again, this idea of the U.S. threatening to go to war and use our nuclear weapons also acted as a deterrent to the Soviet Union. Number 3, how did tensions increase between the U.S. and the USSR toward the end of Eisenhower's term? There's two examples we're going to talk about. One of them is the launching of the Sputnik satellite by the Soviet Unions. When the Soviets did this, it took the U.S. by surprise, and it made us realize that potentially the Soviets could put nuclear missiles into space. And this really kind of kicked the American space program into gear. It led to the creation of NASA and a lot of spending on science and technology, education, and really kind of a ramping up of this idea of the space race and the arms race between the U.S. and the Soviets. Another incident was the U-2 spy plane incident. So an American U-2 spy plane was shot down over Soviet territory right at the same time President Eisenhower was meeting with Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union. The spy was captured, and basically this showed that the U.S. and the Soviets were spying on each other, would continue to spy on each other, and showed that the Cold War was in no sense, anywhere close to being over. Number 4, this is kind of a reference to previous units, but why did suburban areas grow during the 1950s? The GI Bill was one reason. This gave very cheap home loans to military veterans. The construction of the Eisenhower interstate highway system made transportation much more easy and more efficient, which led to people being able to live far away from where they worked. You could live in the suburbs and drive to the city. Finally, the construction of Levittowns and other cheap housing developments made suburbs much more affordable for young families. Number 5, President Kennedy. During the election of 1960, Kennedy debated Nixon on national TV. Why is this debate significant? This Kennedy-Nixon debate in 1960 was the first televised debate. People who saw the debate on TV thought Kennedy won. Kennedy looked younger, he looked more refreshed, he looked more poised and professional. Although people who listened to the debate in the radio thought Nixon won. Even though Nixon made a lot of good points, he looked terrible on TV, he was sick, he was unshaven. So basically this showed the power of image and the power of television in politics. Number 6, when Kennedy sent CIA-trained Cuban exiles into the Bay of Pigs in Cuba, he expected the invasion to be successful. The mission failed. How come? Well, there was a variety of reasons. First of all, through their spying and intelligence gathering, the Cubans knew the invasion was coming. The bombing campaign did not destroy the Cuban Air Force. Some of the landing craft that brought some of these CIA-trained exiles onto the shore got stuck on coral reefs. The timing was poor. And eventually, President Kennedy decided never to send in actual U.S. forces. So overall, it was a massive failure and an embarrassment to the United States and President Kennedy. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Soviet Union was placing missiles in Cuba, which was very close to Florida, what actions did Kennedy take to stop the Soviets from placing missiles in Cuba? So he placed a naval quarantine, or essentially a blockade, around the island of Cuba. He delivered a public ultimatum to the Soviets to remove the missiles. And then secretly, he made a deal with the Soviets that said they would remove missiles in Cuba if the U.S. promised not to invade, and also if the U.S. promised to move our missiles from Turkey. And 7A, what important treaty emerged from the Cuban Missile Crisis? So after the crisis was over, the U.S. and the Soviets signed what's known as the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. And as the name implies, this basically limited the testing of nuclear weapons and specifically said they couldn't be tested in outer space, underwater, or in the atmosphere. One more about President Kennedy. Kennedy was concerned about communism spreading to Latin America and other developing nations. Explain how the Peace Corps addressed these concerns. And actually, the time's running out, so we'll answer number 8 in the next video.